Hello all, and welcome to Are You Hooked?, where we discuss how a TV show captivates an audience. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
We're fascinated by what draws people into a story and want to understand the pieces that get us hooked on a TV show. In this episode, we will be discussing the closing scene of Succession, Season 1, Episode 1. This is your spoiler for the episode. If you haven't watched it, we're about to talk about the ending scene. So we will be hearkening back to some of the plot points and perhaps the way that this episode ends. Okay, Sarah, what happens in the scene that we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, in this scene, Logan is talking with the kids in the helicopter, and then he has a medical event. They end up at the hospital. Not great.
Nope.
Okay. So if you want to watch this scene, you can find it streaming on Max.
All right. So, Sarah, does the ending scene of Succession Season 1, Episode 1 make you want to watch the next episode? Why or why not?
Yes, this scene had me hooked. I think for me, the piece of it that was really impactful, it's such a small detail, but we see Logan have this health crisis, and we see how his family responds, then Shiv talking with Kendall, but the episode ends with the camera a wide shot, and we're hearing all of these different reactions to his health crisis. And we see the scale of Logan's health affecting everything. It's affecting the markets. It's affecting TV. It's affecting news. It's affecting culture. Like, this is a big deal. And I think that emphasis and that final shot of this episode made me want to continue watching. So what about you? Does the ending scene make you want to watch the next episode?
Yes, it definitely does. And I think it's because of the relational dynamics that have been established over the course of the rest of the episode leading up to this scene that then I now understand the vacuum that Logan not being there anymore. What does that do for all of the players, all of the people in his orbit that have been doting on him, trying to garner influence and favor with him for the course of this hour-long episode? And so the thought of the chaos that could ensue when all of these characters are now not having their center of gravity, what happens next, I think was the big question mark for me. And I think this scene works because the rest of the episode has done such an effective job of teeing up and showing how every character, both in his family and in his business, have been trying to garner and lobby for all of their different wants and needs. And he holds so much power. So if he's not there anymore, what are they all going to do? How are they going to fight each other? What's the chaos and drama that will ensue there? So I think understanding his place on the game board amidst all of these other players and characters, I think is vital for this scene working as well as it did for me, because the vacuum that this man will leave behind is going to be massive. And that's really fun. We love to see some chaos ensue.
And chaos does ensue indeed. And I love in this scene, you see, the vulnerability from Shiv. And she is such a strong character and has such a strong personality. But in this moment, she is scared and vulnerable, and she doesn't know what to do. And I love that piece of it contrasted with Kendall, who he hyped himself up. He's pumped up. He thinks he just closed this awesome deal, but he doesn't realize how vulnerable he actually is because he doesn't have all of the information, and he makes what is potentially a very bad decision. And so I love that both of these characters are so vulnerable in different ways as a result of their dad's health crisis. And I thought that was a really interesting juxtaposition between these two siblings who in some ways are very similar and in some ways are very different from each other.
Yeah. And are reacting with their emotions in very different ways. One is much more able to express them, and the other is really like kind of icy and kind of barefaced in how he's feeling like he has space and safety to be able to express them. One of the bits that I really thought was interesting about the way that Kendall receives the call is that it's in the midst of him making the deal with Volter, and Volter threatening Kendall by saying like, yeah, well, you've invited me into the chicken coop, and now that you don't got daddy anymore, like I'm coming in now. And so the threat is not just to the family and obviously like their father and the relationship with their father, but like for the Roy Corporation as a whole, seeing how much Logan is vital. And now if he's not there, the entire corporation is vulnerable because it is now open for all of these other hungry sharks in the sea to come and feast on this loss that potentially would happen. And so seeing how unstable the Roy Corporation is, I think is also really fun as we head into the next episode, because clearly Logan is the thing that's holding so much together. He's holding the family together, but he's also holding the corporation from the business perspective together.
Yeah, Logan is such a big figure, and you see that in the conversation with the siblings too, and Logan is trying to get them, on his side and like extending these olive branches, and none of them want to challenge him. None of them want to disappoint him. And I love that moment where they're all trying to like calculate, okay, how do we respond to this offer? How do we respond to him? And I love that that scene is filmed in the helicopter. It's so close and tight. And you feel, I don't know, man, like you feel claustrophobic with how it's shot and framed. And so to me, that scene is so stressful because like you see the kids not wanting to like say the wrong thing to their dad. And then Logan has a health crisis and he passes out. And like, then that creates so much frantic chaos in this tiny little space. So I love that the scene starts in that helicopter. And I think that setting choice just adds to the tension and the stress of everything. Also, you're floating in the air while having this conversation, and then he passes out. So you have to be diverted to a hospital. Like, it's so stressful, everything that's happening in that little space. I thought that was so smart.
Yep. You see the one helicopter that was riding next to the other one, and then the one on the right has to veer off to the right, and you're like, oh no, this is not good. This is not good. One of the things that I don't think I had the mental capacity the first time around to notice as much as I do now. One, knowing how the show ends, but then two, watching it a second time, is there's at least 2 or maybe 3 cuts to Marcia in the hospital looking into Logan's hospital room. And the expression on her face is really interesting. Clearly there's a care and a deep love that she has for her husband, but there's something else there too, and I thought that was so intentional of the show to choose to cut these moments and shots of Marcia kind of like peering in and peeking in again and for a third time. There's clearly obviously a loss that potentially she will experience in her companionship and her partner, but there's gains for her as well with this. And because the rest of the episode has talked so much about Logan and his will and writing Marcia in and giving her a double portion, all of that kind of stuff, I think the succession of 2 to 3 shots of Marcia appearing in the hospital room feels so suggestive. And I thought that was some really great choices there. Planting the seeds.
Yeah, and this show is so smart in this scene because we see all of the people involved who might benefit from Logan's death. And so, like, even though this is a moment, it's very scary, people are sad and upset and want to see him be okay, there's also a benefit here. And they could make a lot of money if they inherit his whole empire, and they could inherit power, if he passes away. And I love that this show isn't afraid to show us those glimpses at those, I guess, greedy parts of humanity and showing those desires for power. And it's not big and it's not cartoonish, but there's little hints of it that there's a greater calculation here and there's more motivations here than might meet the eye.
Yes, absolutely. The show is unafraid to shy away from like the worst parts of us as human beings. One of the other shots that, again, I don't think I picked up on as clearly as I can now is there's a distinctive cut. It's at the very few last minute or two right before the voiceover zoom out view of the city with the news sources talking about stock volatility. There's a shot of the watch sitting on the kids' table in their living room of the kid that Logan, I think, like gave the watch to, or Roman did at the baseball game in the scene right before this moment that happens. And that scene and that watch represents so much of the like the insensitivity of the rich and the wealthy to people that are struggling, that this means so much to them, this watch, and this is a huge amount of money that they need. And they're just like playing games with it and kind of making fun of this family. And so even amidst Logan's like very vulnerable medical event, the show's not afraid to also remind us of like kind of the worst parts of this family. And so while we might feeling some like warm fuzzies and sensitivities to this like very emotional moment, the show's also like, but don't forget, they kind of suck too. And they're kind of assholes because you've seen that in the previous scene. And so we know the shot of the watch, we know what that represents.
Yeah, this scene does such a good job of setting the tone for the entire show. Like you know what you're getting in for. We get really great drama, we get really great writing, but we also get these moments of just hilarious, out of place looks at the worst parts of humanity and just how people kind of suck, like a lot. And the show isn't afraid to go there. And, we might have characters in this show that we find really endearing. We both had our favorites, but they're still awful people at the end of the day. And I love that we get that starting in this first episode. Everybody sucks. And the show is unafraid and unashamed of that fact.
Yes. Hilarious, out of place looks at the worst parts of humanity. It's a great way to sum up the show. Not gonna lie. That was well done.
Yeah. Thank you. I try.
Yeah, but it's great because it's subtle. And so I think Succession is a show that rewards an audience that's smart and trusts that the audience is smart. And I feel like that shot is a perfect example of that. It's intercut so quickly amidst a bunch of other things. And the show trusts and knows that we can hold all of these different dimensions and pieces of what's happening in this event and what it means and all of the emotions that we are feeling about it all at once. All of the conflicting, seemingly different ones of like, oh man, this family and this father is dying, but also they kind of suck because they're wealthy and inconsiderate. And we can hold space for all of that all at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do hold space for that.
And we relish in it.
We do, honestly. There's so much just like delicious backstabbing in this. Like, it's just so entertaining to watch. It's a whole hot mess, but man, is it a good time.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Any other last big things we want to mention with this closing scene, or did we hit them all?
I really loved the moment with Kendall and Lawrence, where Lawrence is talking about like, hey, did you hear the news? And just shout out to Rob Yang, who plays Lawrence. And the way that he plays that is just perfect. And so then they do the handshake, and then he says, the news I was talking about was your dad has a brain hemorrhage. Yeah. It's just like, what? This is next level. Just, wow, what are we doing here? But I loved that because you see so many different emotions from Kendall, and he's so proud and he's so pumped. And then Lawrence delivers that line and his whole earth shatters. Yeah. And you can see it. So shout out to Jeremy Strong, who does a phenomenal job in that scene too. But I loved that interaction between the two of them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really great because we are also on the same emotional roller coaster with Kendall. The beginning of the episode starts with him wanting this deal so badly, so desperately, and so we know what this means. And of course, he's not going to think about his father's health. He's thinking about getting this deal done. And until until he hears the news. It's great. It's great writing. Man. Honestly, this is dangerous because we're watching this opening episode and I'm like, oh my God, do I need to watch this show again? Like, this is reeling me in again.
This is what I'm saying. Like, here's my pitch.
Good.
Why don't we just review Succession on TVNS? We can just do a Succession rewatch.
You know? I mean, because we only did season 4, right? That was the beginning of actually fun story. That was the beginning of TVNS from the get-go. Exactly. Is Succession season 4 was coming out and we're like, let's start a whole new show. Yeah? Sounds good. Yeah. Great.
Just for Succession, you know? Succession was what got us there. So
good.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Might be in the calendar someday because this show is excellent.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so much packed into even just this few-minute opening scene, few-minute closing scene. There's so much there that I'm like, oh my gosh, every minute is so meaty. So meaty. So if we're ever in the need for a feast, we know where we need to come.
Succession.
All right. Well, this is our discussion of Succession's closing scene of episode 1. You can find it available to stream on Max. Thank you for listening to this episode of Are You Hooked, where we discuss how a TV show captivates an audience. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune to your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review, letting us know your thoughts about this closing scene of Succession Episode 1. You can connect with us on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at TVNSPod, or email us at tvnspod@gmail.com. We will be back soon to discuss Severance Season 2 with more TVNS content coming your way. We hope you have an amazing week, and we'll talk again very soon.